Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Charity for Civil Servants seminar on looking after your wellbeing, which we've scheduled particularly today because it's Time to Talk Day. So a day promoted by Time to Change, all about encouraging us to talk about mental health and wellbeing. So we've got 280 people registered on this. At the moment, I can see there's 35 of you online. I'm guessing that there are quite a lot more of you on the phone as well. So I'll just introduce myself and then I'll just talk to you a little bit about how we're going to manage the webinar in terms of interaction and those sorts of things. So my name's Kath Cheer, and I've worked for the Charity for Civil Servants for about 5 years. Particularly interested in health and well-being, I guess probably particularly following my own issues of mental ill health. And this session today, it's not rocket science. I doubt very much if you're going to find things that are absolutely brand new for you, excuse me, but I really hope it's going to be a session which will help you to kind of review things about your own mental health and well-being and give you some food for thought about how you might look after yourself better. So I'm just having another little technical problem. I just want to move the slides on. I'm just going to ask, I've got Harvey with me, who's from our IT department, who's just going to remind me how to move the slides on. Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, well, let's hope we have no more little technical problems. So folks, this slide basically shows you a little bit about how to interact if you've joined online. If those of you that have joined by phone, I'm hoping that you will have been able to download a copy of the slides from our website. So as you can see, there is somewhere that you can type in. If you've got comments and questions, you may need to use. You may have a little orange question mark at the top of your screen, or a little orange box with an arrow in it that you may need to tick. But as you can see, there are boxes where you can type in comments, which I would encourage you to do. Also, if you're on the phone, quite a lot of the slides, as you'll see on this one, we've got our dedicated email address. So if you're having any problems with the webinar, or if you want to interact with us during the webinar, do send us emails to this address if you're not joining online. And Harvey's monitoring the email address and will pass any questions. He'll deal with the technical things, and he'll pass anything that's to do with the actual session to me. So let's see if I can be a bit more successful in moving the slides on now. Here we are. So this is what we're hoping to cover in the session today. So we're going to look a little bit about what is mental health. We're going to talk a bit about stress. I guess we're going to have a particular focus on stress because it's so important in terms of managing your well-being, I think. So we'll look a bit about stress, and then we'll look at some tools for managing stress. And what we also hope is that you will have a better understanding of the Charity for Civil Servants and the resources that we have that you or your colleagues may be able to use. So this is a quick slide about the charity. As I said, we'll talk much more at the end of the session about what we can do for well-being. But our vision is about a lifelong community of people offering effective support for each other when life takes a turn for the worse. We could not do what we're doing just as charity employees. You know, we rely completely on our volunteers, on the people that give us money, and also on the people who just help one another or maybe signpost their colleagues to us when that's needed. It's very much about community. And I think the other thing to say to you is this is your charity for life. You're a civil servant today. You may be leaving next week, next month, next year, in a few years' time, but it will be your charity for life, you and your dependents. So I think that's really important for you to remember. So I wonder what the term mental health means to you. If you'd like to join in the discussion, do feel free, if you're online, to type something in. If you want to send an email about it, we can look at it. Obviously, I know that there's a little bit of a delay in you doing that. Excuse me, but hopefully I'll be able to pick some things up about that, because it's always really helpful to have you involved in it. Let me just have a look. I can see somebody. Okay, that's a really interesting comment that someone's come up with, that it's a spectrum, so you can have good or poor mental health, and that's absolutely right. I think a lot of people, when they think about mental health, they just think about poor mental health, whereas actually we all have mental health in the same way that we all have physical health. And I think that it, for all of us, it can be good some days and less good on other days. So I think it's really really important. I'm just having a little look. It's quite tricky on this screen to read anything, to read the comments that you're making, but I've just seen another one where someone said mental health can be about too much stress, and certainly too much stress can really cause you to struggle with your mental health. We're certainly aware of that. So let's have a look at this slide now and see what oh, that's another comment just come in. Let me just have a look. Should be considered with the same level of importance as physical health. I think that's really important. I mean, you've probably heard stuff on the news recently about the government wanting to promote mental health more now. I mean, obviously we're waiting for some money to support that, but I think it's absolutely true. It needs to be considered with the same level of importance as physical health, and they are also very closely linked. So this is a description. I won't say it's a definition of mental health, because it's such a wide-ranging thing, but I'm going to read it out to you in case any of you don't have slides in front of you. Mental health influences how we think and feel about ourselves and others, and how we interpret events. It affects our capacity to learn, to communicate, and to form, sustain, and end relationships. It also influences our ability to cope with change, transition, and life events. So really, it does cover everything about our lives, doesn't it? And I think it's always really interesting to think about as I've just seen another comment from someone saying it's about emotional resilience, which is, in many ways, that's kind of what that definition or that description really covers, isn't it? Because it is about how we cope with those kind of things, and sometimes we may cope well, and sometimes we may cope less well. I'm just having a look now. Yeah, I think there's somebody that's raised an issue about kind of government policies and how they may impact on mental health, and that's certainly financial issues, for example, can certainly impact. So we're going to look now at stress. Let's see if I could just move on to the next slide. It's not moving on. Here we are. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to make comments at the moment. I'm going to do a poll. Now, unfortunately, if you've joined on the phone, you won't be able to join in with this, but I'm hoping that those of you who have joined online will be able to see this on your screens. So the question is stress a mental health condition? And all you need to do is to tick to say whether you think yes or no, if you're able to do that. As I say, if you're not able to, maybe just think about that. At the moment, we're about 70-30, saying yes, it is, 74-26, 73-27. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. I think that's really interesting. That actually stress is not a mental health condition. I'm just going to show you what we've got on the slide for this now. Oops. Okay, so stress is a feeling of being under too much mental or emotional pressure. Pressure turns to stress when we feel unable to cope. It can affect how you think, feel, behave, and it can also affect how your body works. And stress is not a mental health condition in itself. Stress is not a mental health condition, but it can cause illness, and it can really affect your well-being if it's not addressed. So it's interesting that it's actually not, although 73% of you thought it was. But I can understand why you would feel that it might be, because it can have such a huge impact. And that's why I guess it's important to think about how we manage our stress as well. Now I'm going to try and do another poll for those of you who are able to join in. So this is another yes/no question, which is it easier to talk about stress or about mental health? So those of you who are able to vote in that, let's see, we've got 100% on stress at the moment and 0, 97 on stress and 3 on mental health. 95, 5, 93, 7. It's still very high for stress at the moment. 90%, 10%. Okay, thank you for that, folks. I'm going to close that poll now. So as you can see, 90% of you thought it was probably easier to talk about stress. I mean, I think on the whole that is right. I mean, I would really like us to get to a point where that wasn't the case, but I think that might be to do with there's more of a stigma still around mental health. Maybe that everyone feels they can relate to the term stress in some way or another, and maybe as well it helps to kind of place it outside of ourselves, and that may feel easier as well. So we're now going to look at some of the symptoms of stress. I can get on to the next slide. Here we are. Yeah, so some symptoms of stress. You'll probably all identify with some of these. Let's hope not too many of you identify with all of them all the time. So in terms of feelings, you might be feeling overwhelmed, irritable, anxious, or scared. I think prolonged stress can also reduce self-esteem as well. You might be things like, in terms of thinking, it might be racing thoughts, really worrying a lot, finding it hard to concentrate or to make decisions, which obviously might really kind of impact you at work. Physically, some of you probably will be familiar with some of these headaches. I think neck aches often people talk about, don't they? And muscle aches, dizziness, sleep problems, feeling tired. So obviously it can become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or that's not quite the right word, but you're obviously very tired anyway if you're not sleeping properly, which may also cause some more of those physical symptoms. It may cause people to drink or to smoke more. If you notice that maybe you've gone from having a glass of wine once or twice a week to really wanting one or even more than that most days, you might want to think about your stress levels. Because that may be a symptom. You might be snapping more, or you might be trying to avoid the things that are causing you stress. So I think I'm just going to ask you to do another poll. Don't worry, for those of you on the phone, we're not going to spend the whole morning doing polls. We've got 3, and this is the last one. This is a slightly different one. Oops, let me go back. So I'll leave that slide up, but I will choose the next slide, which is, which of these can cause stress? So actually, you can choose any or all of these. So I've got down here, for those of you that can't see it, I've got work, money, family life, moving house, and caring. So really, just any of those that you think might cause stress. And as I said, you can put them all down. It's not just pick one, it's pick as many as you want for that. It's quite interesting what's coming through at the moment for those of you that are on the phone. At the moment, moving house is coming very low, with caring and family life quite low, work being the highest at the moment, and money quite high as well. So a range of responses. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to close that poll now. I mean, actually, what I would say is that probably all those things can cause stress. I mean, I know from talking to groups of civil servants when I go round to places that for some people, like it's almost like their family or their home with their family life is like their haven, it's like their safe place. But for other people, it can be really so very stressful, and probably for every person that I talk to who is really stressed by work, there might be another person who has got so many complicated things going on outside of work that work is almost like a safe haven for them. So different things, but any of those things and almost anything else really can cause us stress. It might depend on what's going on for us. I mean, obviously the money thing, I think that kind of, we kind of know that civil servants have been stuck on very, very little pay rise for many, many years, and that kind of relentless thing about not having enough money, and or just only just, oh, okay, sorry, I've just had a comment from somebody that said it only allowed you to choose one option on the last one. I'm really sorry, that's probably the way I set it up, which probably explains why I was getting unusual results. Julia, thank you for letting me know, and apologies to all of you. Oh yes, somebody else has also said, yeah, several of you have said you only allowed you to choose one. I'm really apologise about that. Obviously, that's probably user error in the setting up of the webinar. Okay, so you've already got the next slide on the screen, and I think that one of the things that's really important to think about is, so all these different things can cause us stress depending on what's going on for us, and maybe things like what are our relationships like, what is our work situation like, those kind of things, what is our financial situation. But also personal vulnerability can have a major impact on how we react to stress. So what you've got on this slide is what's called the stress vulnerability model, which kind of shows it's quite simplistic really. But if you have a look, see, vulnerability is on the axis at the bottom, and stress is on the axis to the left. So it kind of shows, if you can see, that if you've got very low vulnerability, by which I kind of mean if you're feeling pretty resilient at the moment, you can probably cope with quite a lot of stress before it can really impact your well-being. Whereas if you're feeling very vulnerable at the moment, you might be able to cope with very little stress before it impacts your well-being. And I think that this is really important to think about. We'll look at it in the next slide as well, but I think this is really important to think about, because I think in the workplace it can be quite difficult when we think somebody is saying they're feeling really, really stressed, maybe by the workload, and we're thinking, well, we've all got this workload and the rest of us are coping with it, why aren't you? And it might well be that person is just much, much more vulnerable at the moment for whatever reason. So we don't all react to stress. We don't all react to issues in the same way. So I think that's and I'm going to move on to the next slide, because I think that's, oh no, not the next slide, the slide afterwards. This one, first of all, as I've already talked about workplace. Let's look at workplace stress for a moment, if I can get on to the next slide. Here we are. I wonder if those of you that are able to interact either by email or by comments want to mention any of the things that you think might be the causes of stress in the workplace. And I will try to read them on this very small bit of screen that I've got, where I can read when I can read your comments. Okay, someone's put Brexit. I don't know if that was to do with stress in the workplace, or that was another comment. But we do know that certainly that would be a stress for some civil servants because of the pressures of the work that may be impacting on them. Anything else that might be a cause of stress okay, I've got some coming in now. Tight deadlines, I think that's absolutely right. It can be relationships with someone's put relationships with manager, that certainly can be, but I think it's probably good to broaden it out to say that actually relationships with anyone in the workplace could be a real issue actually. Yeah. Yes, I think that's really helpful. I'm just having a look to see if there's anything else that's, what's this about colleagues here? Yeah, colleagues again and too much work. That seems to be very much a theme of what's coming in. And also something about like a lack of clarity. I think that can be, it's really interesting. We're going to look in a minute at what the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, says are the main causes of stress in the workplace. Yes, okay, that's really interesting as well. We've got a comment coming in about task versus workload imbalance. I think lots of things around how we kind of manage the workloads and the changing pace, things being too fast paced or too much work. I think that those are all real issues. Thank you so much for joining in. If I haven't seen your comments, I do apologize. If you could see my screen, you would understand why it might be quite hard to read some of them. I can see Harvey's got another one coming in. Stress with IT today. Yes, IT certainly can cause a lot of stress. It's caused me quite a lot of stress this morning. I couldn't get online at all earlier on, but I think that that's right. And, you know, we can waste time kind of trying to get things sorted out, can't we? So let's have a look. Thank you for that. And now let's have a look. These are, if you're phoning in or if you're online from Scotland or Northern Ireland, these are very similar to the ones that are recognised in other nations in the UK as well. So these are considered to be the main things, which I think really you've covered pretty much most of them. Workload, role uncertainty, I think that can be so tricky. Lack of control, that's kind of about the idea that the more kind of autonomy you have in your role, the better it is for your stress levels, really. So yeah. But also support and relationships. How much support do you get? What is your relationship like? And then there's a big one here, which is about change. I think kind of probably a couple of the responses that you made probably alluded to that as well. Change is a big issue and how it's dealt with. None of us can what's the word? None of us can influence the fact that change is going to happen because we all know it will. But it is sometimes about how it does happen and yeah, how it's managed, I guess. But it can be really tricky. So these are the kind of things. And the other thing just to mention is it's not on the HSE list, but what they do say is that if you work in a customer facing role, the kind of stresses of dealing with customers, I think there can be all kinds of stresses if people are aggressive or upset. And also recently I seem to have spoken to quite a lot of people who are maybe dealing with really tricky things at home, maybe they're carers or something, and then they're working in a service where they're having to interact with the public who also have similar problems. So that kind of thing of almost like you can't get away from that, you can't get away from things, that can be an issue as well. So now I'm going to look at this next slide, which is kind of about vulnerability and stress, but it's also beginning to move on to things, looking at how you can use tools to manage your own stresses. So quite like this slide because it's a picture and I quite like pictorial things. So the picture about this is the idea that we've all got a bucket that our stress flows into. And as you can see in big in yellow on it, it says the vulnerability is shown by the size of the bucket. So if I'm feeling really vulnerable at the moment, then my bucket is going to be really small. I'm not going to be able to cope with very much in that bucket before the bucket starts to overflow. If I'm feeling much more resilient, then the chances are that my bucket is much bigger. And I, like on the previous thing about about stress and vulnerability, I can probably cope with much more. So as you can see from this, stress flows into the bucket, money. These are just examples, relationships, ill health, work. It could be, for you, it could be something completely different. It might be, for some people, that actually money is such a stress that it pretty much fills up the bucket completely. Or it might be that you're going through a relationship breakup and actually that is pretty much filling up the bucket completely. So some things might take up a different amount of space in that bucket as well. And I think, again, to think about it in the workplace, to think about how different people will cope with different level with stress in different ways. And that, if you're thinking about it in this pictorial way, it might be to do with the fact of the size of their bucket or what's already in their bucket. So the good thing about this model, I think, because otherwise I think it would be just a little bit depressing. All the stress goes into the bucket and then it all overflows and there's no kind of managing it really. So I think the hopeful thing about this is that you can have a tap on the side of your bucket, and excuse me, if you open the tap, you can get rid of some stress. So I think it's probably important to think about the fact that we probably all have what I would call good coping strategies, the kind of coping strategies where the tap works properly and the stress kind of flow out. But we may also have less good coping strategies. I think I alluded earlier to the idea of maybe have a glass of wine once or twice a week, and then you find yourself wanting it more and more often. The kind of things that feel like they're helpful in the moment. I think probably for me, chocolate would probably be one of those not so great coping mechanisms. Talk to a lot of people actually where mental health and money is so intertwined for them, and sometimes spending is linked to your mental health, isn't it? And maybe it does feel like it's a coping mechanism when everything is going wrong or when everything is really difficult and stressful, and then you get the credit card bill or whatever, and then it kind of just fills up your stress bucket all again. So I think that, I don't want to dwell too much on the less helpful coping strategies, because obviously I would be wanting you to encourage you to think about the helpful coping strategies. And I just wonder whether any of you want to interact with the rest of us and say what you find as what is your most helpful coping strategy when you're feeling stressed. I think we will all have different things. Some people find things like exercise are really helpful, and certainly we know that there's actually kind of medical evidence about the benefits of exercise. Sometimes people find things like hobbies or creative things that kind of can help you to really get away from what you're doing. I'm just going to have a little scroll down to see if there's any. Talking to family, somebody has said. I think that that we're on time to talk day to day, aren't we? And I think it's really probably really important to emphasize the benefits of talking to family or close friends and getting support from them. Somebody else has emailed in something now. Let me have a little look. Music is a great therapy, yes, and also somebody is talking about walking. Yeah, I think both of those are really good. And I know that some people talk about how they manage to use their commute into work and back from work maybe as a de-stressor, like if they're walking or they're listening to music or whatever. That's a really interesting one that's come through, being kind to yourself. I think that's a really nice and a really important one, because it can be, what tends to happen is when we're feeling pretty rough, we tend to be really hard on ourselves. I can see Harvey's got another one for me as well. Actually, that's a really important thing that somebody's come about, the importance of taking a lunch break. And that person has actually said taking a lunch break and going for a walk. What a great idea to combine those things. I really feel really strongly that we should all take lunch breaks, because we all need a break in the day. Somebody's talked about crochet. I guess that's one of those. That's one of the creative things. But actually, what the person said is, can't think of anything else when you're counting stitches, and that's really interesting. And it really reflects. I've got a piano and I play piano not very well at all, but it does help me, because when I'm trying to follow the music, I really, really can't think of anything else at all. So, oh, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which has got some tips for managing stress on it. If I can get onto it, just bear with me. Okay, here we are. Yeah, so here are some tips for manage. Oh, and I forgot to say to you when we were on the last slide that you should have found either on the website if you've joined by phone or on the webinar login page, there is a handout about the stress bucket. And I think, you know, if you're interested, download are causing you stress at the moment, and also the things that the things that you can do to manage that, because it is good to think about those things. Let's have a look. Oh yes, actually I think that's we've just had a comment from somebody who's talking about workplace adjustment passports, and I think that is I do think that's actually really important. There is actually a civil service wide workplace adjustment passport. So if you are really struggling with your mental health, I think it is really worth looking. I mean, we don't look in depth at kind of mental health and workplace adjustments in this webinar, but I think it is really important to know that if you are struggling with your mental health, there may well be some adjustments that could be put in place for you. I mean, obviously, it does require you to be open about your mental health, which can be a challenge. But I guess, I just think the more we can all talk about that, the better all our workplaces and lives are going to be. And so thank you to the person who just sent in an email about colouring. Colouring has become much more of a thing, hasn't it, in recent years? You can buy, this person just talked about an app, but obviously you can buy lots of colouring books now as well, which I think is great. I mean, anything really, and I always find, I don't know how you find it, but I always find that for me, watching television can be great sometimes, but if I'm feeling really stressed, it's a little bit too passive for me, and it is better for me to do something that's a little bit more active, like playing the piano or doing something a little bit creative, or taking the dog out, as long as he doesn't misbehave and then cause me even more stress than I was feeling already. So anyway, these are some tips. Top one, don't keep everything to yourself. Tell someone about it. Now, we know that talking doesn't work for 100% of people, but it works for most people. But it is about finding someone that you feel safe to talk to. If you're sort of struggling and wondering about whether you should talk to your manager, but you're not quite sure, you might want to find a friend or family member that you could kind of try out with first and see. But I think the more we keep talking, the better it is. That, I mean, I certainly know that for me, I've been well for a long time now, but I had 3 years out of professional work quite a long time ago now. And I know that for me, one of the really big things was never talking about how I was. I was very good at listening to other people, but I wasn't very good at talking about myself. And that really wasn't good for me and my mental health over a very long period of time. Keeping active, we've talked about that. It doesn't have to be going to the gym. I think some people think, oh no, I just couldn't go for a run or go to the gym, but actually it can be going for a walk. It can be doing a bit of gardening. I hate to say it could also be a bit of housework, but it could be, but I'm not trying to encourage everyone to waste their time spending too much time doing housework. I think it's really important to look after your physical health, even when you're feeling really stressed, because the temptation can be to kind of, if you feel you've got no time and you're feeling really stressed, the temptation can be to cut corners, but actually making sure that you eat well, trying to make sure that you get enough sleep. Look at your sleep hygiene. If you are really struggling to sleep, there's stuff on our website about sleep, and there's also, I think we're going to have there's a webinar scheduled for later this spring, which is about sleep as well. So it might be worth you are looking out for that. Obviously, we say beware alcohol. We're not saying don't drink. We're not here to tell you what to do and what not to do. But just, look at what what your habits are. And they might see if it is you are drinking as a result of stress, and maybe you could do something else about it. It may be helpful. You may find it helpful to try to work out what causes you stress. Sometimes one of the things that I do in my work is I'm a mental health first aid instructor, and we use something very similar to the stress bucket that we've just been talking about on there. And what we do an exercise where we ask people to kind of write down in a kind of picture of a container what the things are that cause them stress. And people often feel a bit like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do that. It feels really stressful to do. But actually, most people find it quite cathartic to just write everything down, and to kind of, sometimes it can help you to understand what's going on. It may also help you to kind of prioritize and to maybe make a plan for the things that you can change. And obviously we all know that there are things in our lives that are stressful that we can't change. And, I guess the fewer of those we have, the better. But we know that that's life, that there will always be things that we just have to accept. I guess staying as positive and hopeful as we can is really good. And then, of course, there are supports available. GP, if you're feeling like your mental health is really impacted, we would encourage you to go to the GP. There's lots of support online. I mean, I'm going to show you in a minute. We're going to come off the slides and actually look at the charity's website, so that you can, and if you're joining from a phone, if you're able to go onto the website, if you've got a computer handy and you are able to access it, that would be great. But we have got quite a lot of resources on the website. But there's other stuff online. There's a website called NHS Choices, which if you put in Mood Zone, it has lots of stuff about stress, anxiety and depression. Plenty of reputable organisations about anxiety, depression and that sort of thing. Unless you've joined from the MOD, you should all have an employee assistance provider that is contracted by your department to provide wellbeing services for employees, and that should include access to up to 6 sessions of counselling. If you're in MOD, the welfare team should provide a similar service. Also, if you're in NICS in Northern Ireland, I think you've got actually EAP and welfare there. Obviously, talk to your line manager if there are struggles at work and you feel that you can. Do talk to your line manager. There's always HR, there's occupational health, and of course there's us as well. So I think there are resources that you can use. So I'm just going to show you the next slide, which will tell you about some of the resources, and then we're going to have a go at looking at the website. So let's just have a look and see how we get on with this. So some things on the website, in case I forget to show you all these things. So you can do a stress test. It's relatively quick to do the stress test. It's quite useful because it has lots of commentary with it as well. But if you do the stress test, you will come out as either high, low or medium stress levels, and then there'll be recommendations about what you could do to better support you. There is some guidance for staff and managers on our website. We've got downloadable booklets which were developed by the Mental Health Foundation. Live chat with a qualified relationship counsellor, and you can also access a 4-week online mindfulness course. So bear with me. Alt tab. Okay, I'm going to just try Alt tab and see if I can get you onto. Oops, Alt tab. Oh, hang on a second. Alt tab. But it's not stopping. So, I need to do it like this. No. Sorry, folks. Okay, folks. I do apologise about yet another slight technical hitch. Thankfully, I've got Harvey here. I'm not quite sure what we'd be doing otherwise. Probably be sitting and crying in the corner or something. trying to find ways to manage my stress. Anyway, okay, folks. So apologies if you have not got access to a computer at the moment, but I'm going to try and describe the website to you while I'm doing it, so that you're not kind of missing out. So as you can see, it's really the digital tools that I want to tell you about. So if I just click, you'll see across the top of the screen, there are various options: digital tools, our services. And if you click on digital tools, like I just did, and if you wait a minute, hopefully that's right. So, and let's see if I can just, Harvey, can you just come and help me again? Now I've got to scroll down the screen, but I haven't got the thing down the side. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, Harvey has just shown me how to use 2 fingers to scroll down the screen when I haven't got a little bar thing on the side. So you'll come up with various boxes. Help and advice webinars. I'm sure that most of you have seen this because you've joined the webinar today. There's a list that takes you up to May at the moment. I don't think we're redoing this one before May. We're doing stress, anxiety and depression for managers, but there's also various other ones. There's one that's certainly about sleep, one about resilience, a whole range of things. So it's definitely worth looking at. We kind of touched on the fact that money can be such a big issue for and around stress. So there's a whole load of things there about financial capability is a really weird phrase, but it's just about things like how can you budget better, how can you save better, those kind of things. This is where as well you can access relationship counselling. So this is an arrangement that we have with Relate, the relationship charity. That's for England and Wales, but actually if you're in Northern Ireland or Scotland, you can also access this where there's no kind of limit on it. So you can access, if you click on the relationship counselling box, you can access up to 3 sessions of live chat with a qualified relationship counsellor. And if you feel from that you would benefit from some actual talking therapy, some relationship counselling talking therapy, if you come to us, we may be able to assist with that. I'm going to talk to you in a little while longer about how you can make an application to the charity. The stress test is on here. The stress test is, are you feeling weighed down? The Be Mindful online course is there as well. And also I forgot to mention the legal information app. So we have a partnership with an organisation called Law Express. You can download their app, and if you have got a current legal issue that you're struggling with, unfortunately we can't deal with employment issues for civil servants, but if you've got some other legal issue that you're struggling with, you can download that app, and it will also give you the option to access up to 3 telephone consultations about that issue. So they won't look at paperwork and they won't represent you, but they will give you advice about the issue that you're concerned about. So then we've got Jane Bott, who will talk to you about money. She's great, actually. Lots of things around managing your money. It's definitely worth looking at. And then we've also got Dogbot, which will take you. Dogbot will really, if you interact with Dogbot, he'll really take you around the wellbeing content on our website. So you'll be asked what particular things are you interested in. You click the things that you're interested in. It will route you further. And then at the end, they will come up with some resources and that they can get emailed to you. So it is, it's a really good way of finding things out. And the other thing is the Wellbeing Hub, which is really helpful. It makes our wellbeing content on our website much easier to negotiate through. And then we've got there's a budget calculator. So if you are concerned about money, it's just interesting, actually. I've just seen a comment from somebody about credit cards and how we should get rid of how we should get rid of credit cards. Well, yeah, I mean, I tend to agree that they certainly are. They are a cause of concern for many people, so for some people they can work them very well. But the budget calculator might be helpful for you. If you're a carer, there's the two bottom ones on here about carers. So if you're a carer, you can download an emergency plan, which is something that you can fill in for if something happens to you, so you can't continue to be a carer. But there's also the link. If you click on the Are You a Carer box, you'll get a link to the services that we can provide for carers. So that's a quick look at what our digital resource is now. And I'm hoping Harvey's going to help me to get back to the presentation. Hold Alt, tap Tab, and tap it again. Okay, I'm back. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, I hope you're back with me. So I'm just going to move on now. Just wanted to talk briefly about 5 ways to wellbeing. I don't know if you're in Northern Ireland, I think it's called Take 5. I don't know how many of you have heard of the 5 ways to wellbeing. They're not particularly ideas to help you to manage stress per se. They're more about developed by the New Economics Foundation, evidence-based, and the idea is that these are things that we should all incorporate into our lives for better well-being. It's not particularly about managing stress, although, you know, probably these are the kind of things that could help. So connect, that thing about meaningful relationships. You know, the person in your office who maybe doesn't speak to anyone from when they go home on a Friday to when they come back on a Monday morning, they may be somebody who is really quite vulnerable, because that whole thing about connection is so important. Being active, doing that, going for a walk, doing the gardening, all those kind of things, that's really helpful. Taking notice is a kind of, I suppose, it's what I would call the kind of the simple end of mindfulness, which some of you are probably aware of. So, I mean, I always think about it in terms of how much do we actually notice what's going on around us, and how much are we just in our heads all the time worrying about what's coming next or what happened before. And an example I'll give you is, I've mentioned I've got a dog anyway, haven't I? But I take my dog out in the morning when he's not refusing to go before work. And I know that it's been a good walk if when I get back, I can kind of remember it, and I can remember noticing. I mean, I'm very lucky. I can walk across a field, round through a churchyard, so it's kind of a bit countrified. So I can notice the weather and the green and the sky. And if I've noticed that, then it feels like it's been a good walk, and I do feel like it's been good for me. If when I get back, all I can remember is having arguments in my head with somebody, or worrying about what I'm going to get done that day, or feeling really grumpy with the dog because he was refusing to move, it's probably not so great for me. I haven't really taken notice so much as just been in my head. And then there's that thing about keeping learning, of those things that occupy your brain in a different way to work, maybe. You know, it doesn't mean, oh, you've got to join the Open University or you've got to do an evening class. Plenty of people don't have time for that. But sometimes it's as simple as doing Sudoku or a crossword, or doing some kind of other kind of puzzle, something that just uses your brain. And then the 5th one is give. It doesn't have to be about giving money, and it doesn't have to be about giving too much time. I mean, there is lots of research that suggests that people who do voluntary work have better well-being. But, you know, for me, the jury's out on whether that might be because they've got time to do the voluntary work in the first place. I don't know. But it is about looking at that thing about looking out for other people and not being completely focused on ourselves all the time. So those are just some ideas of things to think about. And then if you are interested in kind of working on your own well-being, kind of got an example of something that you might choose to look at for yourself, a wellbeing plan. If you're on the phone, you can download this from our website. If you've joined online, then you should be able to download it as well. It's one of the handouts for the session. So it's just looking at things like, what am I like on a good day? What should I do to maintain good well-being? What happens when things start to slip or I get stressed? What are the things I can do when that happens, and things that I might like to do a bit more of? I'm conscious of time, but I think I'll just kind of talk you very briefly through some of the things that I might put in one of mine, just as kind of as an example. I'm certainly not, I'm certainly not the best person at managing my stress or any of those things, but just to kind of give you an idea. So on a good day, probably in a work context or elsewhere, I'll probably be quite sociable. I'll be quite happy. I'll find it quite easy to ask for help if I'm struggling, which is good job. I'm having a good day today, as I've needed to ask for quite a lot of help today. Yeah, I will probably have slept pretty well the night before. I'll have enjoyed my dog walk. I will have been able to focus on things that weren't just in my head. In terms of maintaining good well-being, it is keeping up with the dog walking, not too much turning up my nose at the rain, making sure I have a good diet, not having too much chocolate or alcohol, just kind of maintaining a good diet. Definitely for me, getting enough sleep. And I think for me as well, because I live on my own, making sure that I do have enough social contact. I do speak to enough people, because when you live on your own and work from home as well, which is what I do, that can be an issue. So the kind of things that might happen when things start to slip, I might sleep less well. I probably would just be a bit less productive. My concentration might not be quite so great. I might be less happy about asking for help. I might feel like I've got to just sort things out for myself. Be more likely to go for the chocolates. Be more likely to fancy a glass of wine after work. Probably more likely to spend more time watching television, which isn't necessarily so helpful. So for me, the things that I can do when that happens is probably, there's certainly something about keeping up a routine, because sometimes it can feel really counterintuitive. I don't feel great, I really don't want to be bothered to cook dinner. Actually, to still keep up those routines, keep eating a decent diet, keep going to bed at a sensible time, making sure that I talk to people, don't isolate myself, because that can be a little bit of a temptation. Oh, and things I'd like to do more of. Probably for me, it probably would be more around kind of creative things and having a few more projects on the go, I think. But that's something that's very individual. The Wellbeing Plan, in a way, the 5 ways to wellbeing is quite generic. The Wellbeing Plan is quite specific to you and where you're at in your life at the moment. And, it might well be that your plan for now would be very different to your plan for 6 months. For 6 months' time. So we've got about 8 minutes left. Anything in the advertising of the webinar that said there was going to be lots of time for questions and answers at the end was a lie, I'm afraid. I'm going to talk you through now. I mean, I'm not sure how much time we're going to need for this. These couple of slides is about what we do if you actually make an application to the charity and you talk about well-being and mental health issues. So, you've seen already that actually there's loads of stuff online. You may not need to make an application. You may be able to log on and see the stuff that's helpful for you. But if you do feel you're struggling and you just don't know how to get the support that you need, or you think that we might be able to help in some way, you'd probably be kind of put into our wellbeing service. And the way the wellbeing service works is that we arrange to have a supportive telephone conversation with you. We're not counsellors, we're not mental health practitioners, but we do arrange a conversation with you. And the kind of things we talk about during that conversation is about how you are at the moment, any particular issues of concern that you've raised as part of your application, how have things been over time, any help that you are getting or you've used in the past, what was helpful, and the kind of things that you think might be helpful for you. And so from that, we try to signpost you to organisations that might be helpful, and sometimes there may be a route to specialist charities. For example, I'm only going to give you one example, but we've got a partnership with an organisation called Anxiety UK. So depending on somebody's particular circumstances, we might be able to refer them to Anxiety UK, and they would do a telephone assessment, come back to us and say, okay, we think this person would benefit from a certain number of sessions of a particular type of therapy. Are you prepared to pay for it? And obviously, we then need a financial application from that person in order to be able to consider whether we can provide financial assistance. We do tend to have a policy where we don't provide if there are alternative resources. So if you haven't been to your EAP, we would probably be encouraging you to go to the EAP first. We'd want to know what was going on with NHS services in your area, but we do know that there tends to be a very long wait, and we don't, I've spoken to somebody recently who'd been on a waiting list for more than 6 months and had phoned up to find out what was happening, and she'd just been told you're on a waiting list. Not very helpful. So we will assist if people are on a waiting list for NHS, but we do want to know that they've used other free resources that are available to them first. So we're not mental health practitioners, we're not counsellors. We can't provide a solution to everyone's problems. I mean, I think when we're talking about mental health and well-being, things are very complex. And if you think back to what we talked about with the stress bucket around some things are things that we can't change. We can't solve everyone's problems, but we try. I suppose what we always hope is that contact with us will make some difference, if only in some small way. And yeah, as I've just mentioned, the replacement. We don't replace services that are already in existence. So in terms of other services, obviously I've kind of just alluded briefly to financial assistance in terms of assistance with counselling. But obviously we provide financial assistance with a whole range of things. Essential household items. Sometimes if people need to move, if they're having problems because of a relationship breakdown or a bereavement, all kinds of things, additional costs related to caring, all kinds of things. And linked to that, we know that some people who apply to us have got real difficulties with money. So we've got a team of qualified money advisors who can also offer that money advice service as well. And then we've got a range of services for carers, which I'd really like to tell you about, but I'm very conscious of the time. But if you have a look on the website, you'll see there's a whole range of things for carers as well. And I would just say, if there's something, if you think that you need some support with something, have a good look around our website, because the chances are you might find it. And also, if you want to make an application to the charity, you can do that by going onto our website as well. And I really hope for those of you that feel you need to, that you will do. So this is just a quick thing here about, so if you want to support our work, you can make an online donation, donate by text. You can subscribe to our news and updates as well. I mean, I would encourage you to stay in touch with us, just because I think there is, that there is a lot of stuff around at the moment. So yeah, and I would just hope that we can make a difference to people. So that's the end of the webinar, folks. And I'm really sorry, I'm not going to ask for questions now, because really we've only got 2 minutes, and I don't think it's fair to be asking you to send in questions now that I won't be able to answer. But what I would say to you is, if the session has brought up something that you do want to ask about, email the webinar email address, and we will try to respond to you. So that's webinar@foryoubyou.org.uk. I know some of you know that because you've been interacting with us already. So thank you very much, everyone, and really appreciate your contributions. And just a reminder, Time to Talk Day. It's do take the opportunities to talk about mental health and wellbeing issues wherever you can. All right, many thanks for your time, and take care. Bye-bye.